It was a long and kind introduction. I am not with Channel 24 anymore. Channel 24 is a channel where I got to know Hilali as the analyst. The ambassador was before that. Anyways, we've had two very interesting takes on Pakistan-US relations. And because I am an academician, as much as I enjoyed the passion of both Nusrat Mirza Sahab and Hilali, I will like to put things in perspective because that's what I'm trained to do. Yes, we have a very complicated relationship with the United States. We've had a very complicated relationship with the United States for quite some time now. But the basis of that complicated relationship is fairly simple. It is when the convergence of interest between the two countries suited them, the relationship was smooth, we benefited from the relationship, and they benefited from the relationship. And we chose to be a Cold War ally, we chose to be a non-NATO ally, we continue to choose to be a conduit to Afghanistan. So there are certain choices that Pakistan has made in its foreign policy, and those choices have dictated the construct of the relationship that we look at today. Yes, new developments have happened, which always happen in international relations and international politics, and they've had a direct impact on the relations between Pakistan and US, and I call this the tortured triangle relationship. So we have a tortured triangular relationship between Pakistan, United States, and India. For a very long time, Pakistan was a country which was with the United States in this region, and India was with the Soviet Union. And that's how the things were at that moment in time. We were frontline allies twice, not once, twice. We got our non-NATO ally status during the second time that we were a part of the conflict. And then something interesting happened in South Asia, and that is that the latent adversary of the United States, that is China, became less latent, more aggressive, more assertive, and came across as a state that was challenging United States in this region. And the shift that you see in Pakistan-US relationship is a shift that happened in the second era of more obviously during the second term of President Bush. If I can jog your memory, that is the time when they dehyphenated the relationship between Pakistan and India and gave Pakistan, introduced a terminology FPAK. This is something we did not like, but that is how now we were being perceived in the policy-making circuits of the West and the United States. And that is a new reality with which we have worked since. It was dehyphenation of relationship, and at the same time, a rebalancing of the relationship started, which culminated to a point that you have the South Asia policy unveiled by President Trump, which said things which Pakistan did not like. I also call it the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and the relationship, the polarization was in some ways complete, and we came up with what now we understand as the Bajwa Doctrine. Bajwa Doctrine is something very interesting. We never came up with this. You see, we were just doing things. And then there's this royal think tank in Britain. He said, Pakistan has changed its foreign policy stance, and it has come up with the Bajwa Doctrine. And the Bajwa Doctrine is that the chief of the army is giving United States a pushback. And the pushback is very categorical. The pushback says that we do not want your money, but we want the recognition of the services that we have rendered. More importantly, Pakistan has done enough and has showcased it, and it is time the international community reciprocated and responded and fulfilled its responsibilities. But perhaps most importantly, we said we are responsible for maintaining peace within our borders, and we cannot be held responsible and blamed for the failures of the United States and the Afghan government on the other side of the border. And that was the crux of what Bajwa was doing and saying. And the international community, a British think tank, called it the Bajwa Doctrine. Then some of our high-flying journalists thought that it has to do something with our democracy and stuff. It had nothing to do with that. It was a foreign policy construct put in place by, unfortunately, our military leadership, because somehow over the years our political leadership has become weak or has left that domain in the hands of the military leaderships. And as a result of this, US sees a strategic convergence with India, and that strategic convergence has also sort of consolidated over time. So in 1990, India had a policy which was called Look East. And fast forward 2016, 17, 18, they have a policy which is called Act East. And our Look East is very different from the India Act East or Look East. Our Act East or Look East, which we've also been saying for a couple of years now, is perhaps converging with China and now with Russia. When India says look east, it is looking at the Pacifics, it is looking at Australia, and it is looking at Japan. So let's look at the new battle lines that this rebalancing, and I see so many students, so I'm tempted to sort of focus on that. So what is this rebalancing that is happening? So Modi cultivates both Japan and US as economic partners and as strategic partners, and is trying very hard for Australia to come on board. On the other side, like I said earlier, Pakistan is pushed or chooses to now converge with China, Russia, the Soviet Union. It had fought two wars against, one war definitely against, and perhaps Iran. And look at the statements that are coming out from the United States, because they're very, very interesting. Well, if Hilali is sitting here, and I learn from him every time I hear him speak, but the first thing the Americans do when they bring about a change of policy is they change the lingua. So, you see, jihad and mujahid, all was very kosher when they needed it, and it wasn't after so many years. So the change that happened in the lingua in the United States was interesting. And it was that they started saying, you know, if you read papers from the United States, they would always say Asia Pacific, you see, or Asia specific. So they would look at Asia and Pacific, and US policy would be what? Asia specific and South Asia specific or Pacific. Lately, they say Indo-Pacific. So whatever that they want to see happening in this region, now the convergence is with India. And India has responded and reciprocated to it. It has taken 2 velvet divorces in the last 10 years. One velvet divorce is from Russia, and the other velvet divorce is from Iran. And both these velvet divorces are not lost on those 2 countries, and thus you see a realignment taking place. So US-Asia-Pacific policy, which is very Indo-Pacific, perhaps needs a revisit. Is that what we are trying to say over and over again? The Cold War is probably here, whether we like it or not. Battle lines are being drawn. And the understanding is that this Cold War will be fought on sea lanes. And thus the reference you heard from Hilali about the naval strengthening by the United States, and also interestingly how Russia, not such a huge power, has invested so heavily in the Syrian naval base. The contract is for 42 years. No country writes a contract for 40 years if it has any ambitions of getting out. So US has no intentions of getting out from Afghanistan, and Russia has no intentions of letting US stay there. And US is very, very perturbed at what is happening in the Middle East. And every day, Putin pushes in some more in the Middle East. And then we heard a lot of things about, so perhaps, yes, Indian Ocean is the new field for rebalance. And then we heard a lot of things about American hard power, its tech power, its intelligence, and so on and so forth. With all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, the Indian hard power in the last 17 years has not even allowed it to win one conflict, and that is in Afghanistan. We have to find political solutions to situations, and that is what Pakistan and China are showing their pragmatism by asking US to do. Even perhaps India. Battle lines are easy to draw. Battle lines are very difficult to maintain. We are being pushed into times where conflict seems to be the new reality. The conflict can be the worst than what the kind of conflict we saw. Our only hope is that this time, when we see the approaching Cold War, or perhaps it's already here, we see geopolitical and geo-economics convergence. So China is the enemy stated by the United States. They say that it's a disruptive force. That's what they call China. Very, very responsible people. They call China a disruptive force. This lady who was just being interrogated for a position as a CIA chief categorically said that there are 3 threats to the United States. It's Russia, it's China, 4, North Korea and Iran. I think their focus is more now on Russia and China and perhaps Iran. One more thing. You see, when this nuclear deal with Iran was scrapped or vowed to be scrapped, the American commentators are saying the only problem with Americans is that they do not have a policy for Iran. They do not have a policy for South Asia. It's the continuity of the same. So war has become routine for them. They do not know how to get out of it. Pakistan and China, for the first time perhaps, are together, or Pakistan is together with an international power as a frontline state for an economic breakthrough. There are 6 more corridors. China-Pakistan economic corridor is the first. It is compelling on China to make it work for the other 6 to happen. And we talked about American hard power. I'm going to conclude on that note. What has American hard power given it in the Middle East? Even in Africa, the country they call a shithole are ready to work with the Chinese now. They've had enough of American exploitative capitalism. So I think the world is changing, and responsive nations change and do not react. Thank you so much for your time and attention.